All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Congressman Greg Stanton. I'm here with my colleague for the United States Congress, also representing the Phoenix area, Congresswoman Yassamin Ansari. We used to be colleagues, but she was a councilwoman as well. Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis of the Gila River Indian community. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here as well. We also have a couple of leaders from the nonprofit community that would have been so impacted in such a terrible way if the memo had gone through that was issued just a couple days ago. Mary Lynn Kasanik, President and CEO of Area Agency on Aging Region 1, who's our host here today. Thank you for hosting us. And then Adrian Udarby, Executive Director of Pinnacle Prevention, which is a nutrition program in my district out in the East Valley. On November 5th, 2024, the people of this country elected Donald Trump as President of the United States. They did not elect a king. And it's important for us to say loud and clear that the President has the role and responsibility of President of the United States, but he doesn't get to overstep those bounds. And tragically, we have seen his attempts to overstep that authority just over the last few days. He's only been in office for, I guess, 9 days now, even in his first week to 10 days here in office. On Monday night, he issued a sudden freeze on federal grants that was so sweeping, so broad, so poorly thought out that it created immediate chaos across the state of Arizona, across the entire United States of America. All day yesterday, I spent fielding calls and emails from city leaders, nonprofit leaders, tribal leaders across the state, terrified of what this would mean for their ability to provide critical services to the families and people that they provide those services for. Mayor Gallego, who was going to be here, she was at a funeral for a firefighter, so that's the reason she's unable to be here. But I had a chance to speak with her, and she talked about the impact on public safety, because those grants that were frozen helped to pay for police officers and firefighters in the city of Phoenix and throughout the valley. The Medicaid portal was temporarily shut off. Portals for people experiencing homelessness, in need of housing, they were also turned off. It was pandemonium. Constituents called my office terrified that they wouldn't receive their benefits. Then late yesterday, the White House made an attempt to clean up their mess by clarifying that they didn't mean with these withholding of federal resources, SNAP benefits or Medicaid, they just meant everything else. And then just a couple of hours ago, after a massive public outcry, after a result of this chaos, after people demanding that they receive the services that they had advocated for, the White House backtracked. This is an important victory, but make no mistake, what we saw overall here was Donald Trump testing the limits of what the American people would tolerate. What we saw just over the last few days was a sweeping authoritarian power grab. Congress had voted in a bipartisan way on a budget that authorized and appropriated these funds. The president had signed that budget bill. And the new president, President Trump, decided that he could unilaterally just change all of that and decide to withhold these critically important funds that Congress had appropriated. That's not the way our constitutional system works. Congress holds the purse strings. The president doesn't get to unilaterally change that. We are in, if he continues down this path, we are in a constitutional crisis. And we're going to impact in such a negative way people in this state. I mentioned public safety. We have Governor Lewis here. Tribal members would be so desperately hurt by the taking away of these resources. We have representatives of our aging population who would be devastated if these proposed cuts go through. Obviously, nutrition programs as well. Emergency management programs, even in light of these terrible fires that we've seen in Los Angeles, the impact on our schools, particularly those that receive federal resources through Title I, et cetera, all unknown, all chaos, it's unclear which funds he is targeting, all because he wants to review it and put his particular stamp, what he thinks is okay and was not okay. Again, that is not the way our democracy works. The president was not elected king. He has the role and responsibility of president, but he can't overstep that authority. The power of the purse belongs to Congress, not the president. This is one of the basic principles of our republic, spelled out in Article 1 of the Constitution. They teach you that in middle school. Trump can't withhold federal funding that was passed by Congress, passed on a bipartisan basis. He can't withhold that, period. But this was just the latest blitz of illegal action. Trump had fired dozens of federal agency inspectors general tasked with preventing fraud within government agency. He purged civil servants, career prosecutors at the Department of Justice. He purged civil servants, lifetime civil servants at the State Department. It is all straight out of the Project 2025 playbook. This fight is not over. We know that they withdrew just a couple of hours ago, rescinded the memo. We know they did that because they want to win the stay of that order that a court had issued, so they want to get a short-term legal win in the courthouse, but we know it is coming back. We won this immediate fight against unlawful executive overreach, but the Trump administration is still illegally holding bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funding from Arizona communities through an executive order that he did last week. That means projects that we fought for in a bipartisan way in Phoenix and in Tempe and other areas that I represent right now. Important projects. People who are working on those projects are going to lose their jobs if we don't immediately lift that, if he doesn't rescind that executive order holding out infrastructure dollars. We will not let this stand. We're going to do everything that we need to do in the courts to win, and we're going to do it, get this message out, and we're going to do everything we can in Congress to stop this illegal overreach. Okay, with that, our next speaker is going to be my colleague in the United States Congress. She, just like me, comes from the city world as the former vice mayor of the city of Phoenix, and now is a new member of Congress. And after that, we'll hear from Governor Stephen Roe Lewis. Congresswoman Ansari.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I first of all want to thank Representative Stanton for putting this event together. Obviously, we've all seen multiple confusing headlines this morning. The circumstances that we're meeting under today are different than yesterday, different circumstances than even this morning. Right now, it is not 100% clear what this administration is after. We saw an OMB memo saying that funds were frozen, then a memo rescinded, now miscommunication and different communication coming from the White House press secretary. I think this fight is very, very far from over. This move by President Trump is a blatantly political move to freeze federal grants and loans. This sets a dangerous precedent that directly threatens the base level of relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Full stop. Congress holds the power of the purse, and these are funds that had already been approved. Moreover, this was not an abstract show of force by the Trump administration. A funding freeze of this scale would threaten our police and fire departments, Meals on Wheels, child care programs like Head Start, rental assistance, veterans programs, WIC benefits, student loans, the National Institute of Health, disaster relief, public school programs, infrastructure projects, and more. As it stands, just like Congressman Stanton said, our office's phone lines have been ringing off the hook with Arizonans who are scared, confused, and still do not know what to expect or what is going on. And we all know that they have a right to be. I also want to share some facts about my district and what a freeze like this could mean for families in District 3. Approximately 20% of District 3, which is more than 160,000 people, are on Medicaid. 46,000 households in this district receive food stamps. Nearly 21,000 seniors in the district live below the poverty level and are eligible for Meals on Wheels delivery. Not to mention, Phoenix police and fire departments would stand to lose over $35 million under a freeze. Phoenix has secured $3.255 billion in federal grants, and a funding freeze could jeopardize $1.6 billion that have yet to be paid by those grants. Sky Harbor could lose up to $130 million of federal funds slated for infrastructure projects. So many of us who are here today have worked hard to secure funds for the city, and knowing that those could be stripped away because of one man's vanity is unacceptable. Again, this is already collected taxpayer money that belongs in programs and services that serve the American people, not waiting around for President Trump's personal approval. Now, anything could again change today, tomorrow. I want to agree with Senate Democrats that postponing tomorrow's scheduled vote on Russell Vogt should be on the table. This is Trump's nominee to head the Office of Management and Budget. Above all, it is clear that President Trump is testing the limits of presidential power, but here today we stand united as a check against it and as a resource to our constituents who are experiencing this uncertainty. Thank you so much. I will turn it back to Representative Stanton.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Those are great words. We really appreciate your strong advocacy. Next, Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis, the leader of the Gila River Indian community. Obviously, the community partners with the federal government and receives significant federal grants to serve the people in this critically important area of our community. Governor.
Good afternoon, and again, thank you, Congressman Stanton. I also want to acknowledge again Representative Ansari, of course, Mayor Kate Gallego, and the other speakers for being here today to discuss these recent federal actions that affect federal funding for tribes and other governments across the country. I am Stephen Rowe Lewis. I'm the governor of the Gila River Indian community, and my remarks today will specifically address these actions as they relate to federal funding and support for the community, for tribes across Indian country, of course the 22 tribes here in Arizona and across the United States. Now, of course, the rescission of the OMB directive to freeze funding is an important step in addressing some of the concerns that we've heard and experienced. But there have been other actions alongside this that are equally and perhaps even more concerning for us, namely the requirement that all agencies fill out a questionnaire relating to 2,600 programs that might contravene certain new executive orders. Now, currently, we are in the information gathering stage about the potential impacts that this could have on our community and Indian country as a whole. Now, while we undergo this analysis of this potential impacts, I want to focus specifically on the facts and what we do know. We've already heard from a number of our federal partners that they cannot continue to engage with us until they get clearance from OMB that their programs do not contravene, I repeat, do not contravene the new executive orders. This means the planned outreach and meetings have been postponed for at least the time being. At least one agency has indicated that this could be as long as 60 days. I want to start by stating unequivocally that tribal governments, tribal members, and tribal programs are not related in any way to the executive orders that have been issued. No matter how you feel about these executive orders, and I'm not here to comment about that, but tribal governments and tribal programs nonetheless do not fall within that framework. We are governments with statutorily established and funded federal programs that must be respected and confirmed. We have a trust treaty responsibility that exists, that is constitutionally, precedentially, and statutorily established and protected. So any notion that our tribal programs should be swept up in a broader effort to implement these executive orders across the administration is misguided and erroneous. I'm hopeful that once new political leadership is installed at the Department of the Interior, which should happen very soon, this will be immediately clarified and our tribal programs will get right back on track. We support the nomination of Secretary Burgum, who has established a track record of dealing fairly and squarely and squarely with tribes. And we look forward to starting our relationship with him on the right foot as soon as he's confirmed. Now again, I'm not here to speak on the broader efforts associated with the administration's executive orders or OMB guidance, but I have to stress that the federal-tribal relationship goes back to the first days of these United States, goes back to the first days when we persevered by working together in partnership as governments to make this country what it is today. That's why I am calling on OMB and Congress to ensure that the Tribal Trust Treaty responsibility is preserved so that the Gila River Indian community and all tribal governments across Indian country can continue to carry out these critical services, such as healthcare, educational, economic, and energy needs for our community. Now, when the federal government and tribal governments work together, it is to the benefit of governments at every level, tribal, local, state, and federal. We've shown this time and time again. So today, I'm calling on OMB and Congress to honor the government-to-government relationship as the trust responsibility and to confirm as soon as possible, please, to confirm as soon as possible that all tribal programs are not otherwise caught up or in any way affected by these recent executive orders, and to engage with us as the valued partners that we can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for that strong reminder of the proper relationship between tribal communities and the federal government. That's very, very important. Next will be Mary Lynn Kasanik. She's the President and CEO of the Area Agency on Aging and our host here today.
Thank you, Congressman Stanton, for inviting me to express our devastating feelings about this executive order. As President and CEO of the Area Agency on Aging Region 1, we serve over 115,000 individuals each year. There are actually 960,000 older adults, 60 and over, who reside here in Maricopa County. When yesterday we spent the whole day looking at what would be the effect of all this, and what we found is that 75% of our funding, over 75% of our funding is from federal sources. So with serving 115,000 clients each year, almost 90,000 clients would be affected by this executive order. And when I say clients, most of them are older adults, but we also have clients that are family caregivers, people 18 to 59 with physical disabilities and long-term care needs, people 18 and over who are HIV positive, older victims of domestic violence, elder abuse, and homelessness. And so there are a lot of individuals that would be impacted by the executive order. And some examples, we looked at some examples of cuts. Last year we served 850,000 meals. And if we had to cut it by 75%, that means that there would be 600,000 less meals that are offered to older adults, such as home-delivered meals and meals at senior centers. This would impact over 11,000 older adults in Maricopa County. The other big concern is home care, which is services that we provide to older adults to help them to stay in their home. No one wants to rush into a nursing home. They want to stay in their home as long as possible. And so we serve every year over 2,000 clients with things like bathing and grooming and grocery shopping and laundry and maybe cleaning toilets, changing linens, and so forth. And so with these cuts, we would have 1,500 clients that would lose services and probably be forced to go into a nursing home or assisted living facility. And one last example, and we have many examples because we have over 55 programs, but another example is family caregivers who are taking care of their loved ones unpaid. And we are helping 700 of those family caregivers with a service called respite. It means it's a break. You are taking care of your loved one who has dementia 24/7, and we just give them like maybe 8 hours a week where they can just go out and do whatever they need to take care of themselves. These federal cuts would impact 500 of those caregivers. So I want to thank our two congressmen for helping us fight this battle, and we are right behind you all the way, and we'll do whatever advocacy work you need for us to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. We appreciate you very much. As my mom had Alzheimer's and had it for many years and got really great care. That's you're doing the Lord's work. We appreciate that tremendously. Adrian Udarby, the Executive Director of Pinnacle Prevention. I apologize for mispronouncing. Who does nutrition work for young people in the East Valley.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Udarby, and I'm the Executive Director of Pinnacle Prevention. We are a nonprofit that's located in the 4th Congressional District, but we serve Arizona statewide, and we have a focus on cultivating a just food system and see access to food as a fundamental human right that we all need every single day. Our team spent the day yesterday fielding calls and emails from farmers and community members who are stressed and worried about the harmful impacts of the recent executive order. We are a deeply interconnected system, and an abrupt and unexpected pause in federal funding means that our neighbors and friends, especially those with young children, are having to worry about the potential loss of programs that help them to stretch their food dollars every single day, to feed their children and put food on the tables every single day. We received calls from moms who are saying, what's going to happen if there's no meals in school for my children? What's going to happen if I can't pick up my WIC benefits for my kids? And worried about then having to make the choice of putting food on the table at the evening and maybe having to pay for medications. Our small farmers here in Arizona build their farm businesses through a seasonal planning, which is done months in advance. Federal grants and loans have helped them to scale their operations and really address critical infrastructure needs to continue to feed all of us here in Arizona. Any pause or delay in funding for any reason means that our farmers are having to make the ironic and really hard decision of whether they can feed community or feed themselves and make sure that their businesses continue to be operational. This harmful executive order and disruption does not just impact those that are participating in federal government programs. The ripple effect impacts us all. You will start to see that when the system is disrupted, the price of food increases for all of us. And we'll be feeling that now, no matter what happens amid this uncertainty, for weeks to come. This puts added pressure on our food banks and our food pantries, while we all collectively together are trying to stretch our food dollars. So we're already feeling the harmful impacts of the uncertainty and not knowing what comes next. And I urge our leaders to seek and share clarity in the best interest of our people and our communities.
So as you can see, the actions of this administration, it's just its first less than 10 days in office, has sown confusion and chaos and pandemonium in so many ways across this country, fear in the hearts of people that receive these benefits, and the president has overstepped his legal authority, and we are here together to say we are going to assert congressional authority because that is our constitutional system, that is what our founding fathers set up, and that is what we are here to fight for. With that, we'll take any questions that you may have. Please.
Congressman Stanton,
Yes.
I'm sure you know about the fact that the memo has been rescinded. You mentioned that, but they've also made clear that they're not backing off on the mission, as it were. So how do you interpret that? Is there any nuance to what they may be able to legally do, with regard to their mission and this memo? How much of an impact does the memo have?
Okay, let me just answer that question. Look, they rescinded it because they're trying to undo the court order that was a stay on that memo. They think they are very cute about it by rescinding that memo. They're going to get rid of that lawsuit. But then immediately the press secretary for the president said the funding freeze is still on. And in fact, the funding freeze on the executive order dealing with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which, by the way, is funding a very important I-10 expansion, including a bridge that's going to improve the safety of the Gila River Indian community members, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Those are all the tax credits to support the electric vehicle industry, et cetera, that rescission of funds is still in place. But look, Project 2025. If you want to see what is happening and what's going to continue to happen, go read that document. It was authored by Russ Vought, who is being before the Senate next week to be the head of the Office of Management and Budget. So this fight is not going away. They believe that the president can unilaterally change anything that Congress has voted on and the president has signed. That after we've reached an agreement with the administration, we voted on a bipartisan deal, it is signed by the President of the United States, that somehow the President of the United States can singularly and unilaterally make changes, decide what he wants to fund and what he doesn't want to fund. That's an authoritarian government. That is not our constitutional system, and that's why we have to, on behalf of America, fight this. We elected a president. Donald Trump won the election. There is no election denialism at this podium. Donald Trump won the election for president, but he is not the king. He doesn't get to make those decisions unilaterally. And if he wants to change these programs, he wants to change it and get rid of DEI or whatever, come to Congress, negotiate, and get the votes. That's how our system works in the United States of America.
I think the congressman said it perfectly, but I think really looking at Russell Vought is important as well, because he is a big believer in Project 2025. He is a very intelligent individual, and it is very alarming that he looks like he will be confirmed into this position, and that just demonstrates that this is not over. This is a time, we're just in week 2 of the Trump presidency. There's going to be endless attempts at rolling back these programs and making unilateral, unconstitutional decisions that will negatively affect the American people, largely people who probably voted for Donald Trump. And I think it's important that people understand the impacts of the decisions that he's making.
We hope our Republican colleagues will join us in this fight on this side of the United States Congress. It's not really a partisan thing. This is the role of Congress that we serve in vis-a-vis the administration. If they give in, they don't speak up, our Republican friends don't speak up and demand that the role of Congress, the constitutional role of Congress, be protected. If the president's able to do this unilaterally, I mean, Congress becomes basically an advisory body. We lose the Article I powers that the founders wanted to provide us. We have to fight, and fight in a bipartisan way. There are other questions, please.
GOP's response to all this has been that Democrats and the media are fear-mongering. They've accused Democrats of using scare tactics. For example, when it comes to Medicaid, they've said, OMB is telling us Medicaid's not going to be on the chopping block. They've claimed that the outages yesterday were unrelated to this funding freeze. So I have 2 questions. First, are you questioning whether Medicaid will be affected by this funding freeze? And then second, how do you respond to this wider allegation of using scare tactics?
Okay. The government's going to run out of money in like 6 weeks. We have to go through a reconciliation process. If you have been, I'm sure you have, been watching all of the documents coming out of the Republican Budget Committee of the cuts that they are proposing, the #1 program that they, in their own documents, indicate is on the chopping block is Medicaid.
But that's a separate issue, right? Not related to this funding freeze.
I would, if you believe it's a separate issue, with all due respect, you may be the only one that thinks that is somehow separate from what we are talking about here today. And oh, by the way, if they want to debate about the particular programs that should be cut or not cut, I might suggest that actually is a debate for a different day. The president needs to execute the budget that was voted on in a bipartisan way, signed by the President of the United States. That budget needs to be executed upon. If he wants to make changes to it, whether it involves Medicaid or not, come to Congress and let's negotiate. But you don't get to do that unilaterally. That is going against our constitutional system. It's illegal and it's authoritarian, and we cannot backslide on our constitutional democracy.
I'll also add, I think that the argument that these Medicaid portals happen to be down on the same day that this memorandum was issued, I'm not convinced by that. States, colleagues of mine across the country had so many constituents reaching out, deeply alarmed and scared. We had constituents calling our office in tears, crying because they said they, went out and got groceries for the week and they don't know the next time they'll be able to afford groceries because they're on SNAP. This fear that's being caused by actions like this, in and of itself, should be a massive problem. But the fact, again, that the vast majority of actions that have already happened in just a week of this presidency are right in line with Project 2025, and everything in there is deeply alarming. And I think looking at what's coming up with the tax fight, it's important to look at who the Republicans and Trump are pushing tax cuts for. They are wanting to reduce taxes even further for the wealthiest corporations in this country, for the wealthiest individuals. They allegedly campaigned on making life easier for working people. But if we pay attention to these actions and what's happening around the budget and taxes, it is painting the exact opposite of a picture.
I have a question for Marilyn and Adrian. We're also trying to figure out who will be impacted. Yeah, we'd like to go to the program, please. But we're also trying to figure out who would be impacted by this freeze in federal funding. We've yet to hear from the White House that nonprofits are exempt. Did either of you have trouble accessing federal funds yesterday or today?
No, not currently. We talked to DES this morning, and they do have they told us that they have access to funds, I think, up until the continuing resolution ends in March 14th or whatever the date is. They didn't seem to think they would have any problems in the next 6 weeks or so, and so they said, just go ahead and bill for it, because what happens is our providers provide the service, and then they bill us, and we bill the state, and we get reimbursed, and we then pay the provider. So they said not to, when you incur the expenses, go ahead, and they said right now they did not believe that they would have a problem. But at some point, and I did ask them the question, if the presidential, the executive order says you can't use these federal funds, even if they've been allocated to you, are you allowed to use them? I mean, I think it's an important question if they say you can't use the federal funds, even if you receive that allocation and it's up in the continuing resolution. So I think it's pretty uncertain.
Yes, we were impacted. So last week we already received a cease and desist order related to funding that's related to the bipartisan infrastructure law for infrastructure grants for farmers. So that happened last week, and then yesterday when we tried to access our payment management systems for some of our federal dollars, we didn't attempt to draw down, but there was a warning message that was there.
On the federal buyout that Trump administration is offering for nearly all federal workers, where is that money going to come from? They're offering severance packages basically up for 7 or 8 months. Is that money already allocated, or how can you pay for all this?
Okay, once again, I think the president needs a basic civics lesson. Article 1 of the Constitution says that all powers of the purse come from Congress. He cannot unilaterally enact anything that will encumber the federal purse strings. So that may be his idea. He needs to come to Congress and present that idea and present a proposal. We'll put it through our processes and through committees, etc. And I'm sure there will be at some point a compromise on that. But no, the president cannot, anything that involves federal dollars, the president cannot encumber that unilaterally. All of that would have to come through the United States Congress.
I have a follow-up for Governor Lewis, if I may.
Please.
First question for you, mentioned that you already said that talks and meetings have been halted. Can you talk about kind of right now what you're experiencing in terms of agencies and programs that are currently kind of in limbo right now with regards to the Indian community?
Yes, well, the majority of the tribal projects and the services go through Interior as well. So we're really hoping that the rescission of the OMB memo is a way to kickstart re-engagement with tribal nations. We're dealing with Colorado River issues. Where we're dealing with energy issues and infrastructure issues, the I-10 as well, and we have schools on our reservation. I know we have a majority of Bureau of Indian Education funded schools throughout Arizona as well. They're very concerned as well, although they have forward funding, but nonetheless, we're wanting to make sure that all of our programs and those affected by these programs, we get through this time of uncertainty and uneasiness. And what we're trying to do, I think, as leadership, I know, speaking to my fellow tribal leaders, is trying to separate fact from fiction. That's where we're at right now.
At this point, those programs are still going forward, though? There haven't been anything frozen or halted?
Well, at this point, what we're doing is we're monitoring all of those portals as well, those federal portals. Some of those portals are down, are closed. Some have reopened. So we're really in a state of flux right now. It's very fluid. So it's hard to make a blanket statement at this point. But we want to make sure that the federal government, because of their trust treaty relationship and responsibility as sovereign nations, that that is again a workable relationship, because there are so many critical services that Indian country, that tribes in Arizona, across the nation need, from education to healthcare to first responders and police services. We are nations that have all of those responsibilities to protect and to provide for our tribal members.
All right, any more? One more, please.
One more question for the nonprofit leaders. I was wondering, you guys have to balance the budget over the next few months. Are you budgeting for cuts into federal funding, or are you budgeting for business as usual?
You have an easier one? That's a tough one.
I think if I understand your question, are we already starting to cut funding?
Yeah, does this actually change the way you do operations, or are you kind of just operating business as
It was one day. Yesterday was, where are we? What's the impact? It's like some of the numbers I told you, how many people would be impacted and so forth. And so, and we were going to continue to do that today when, of course, we saw the rescission of the executive order. So, I mean, but with at least 75% of our funding coming from federal sources, if the federal funds are cut, we have no choice but to cut 75% of the services, which will impact over 90,000 clients. I mean, that's it's not like we can go find funding somewhere else. We can't go to the foundations and saying, can you come up with, let me see if the dollar amount, can you come up with $30 million to help offset what the federal government is cutting? I mean, we're talking, this is crisis. This is really crisis. And what do older adults and people with disabilities and long-term care needs and people that are HIV positive and family caregivers, and what do they do if they don't have services? And the homeless, and we don't do a lot with the homeless, but the homeless programs, the domestic violence programs, the shelters, I mean, this would be a major crisis in the United States.
Most nonprofits from the beginning of time are already planning A through Z for any potential funding scenario, because we already operate on razor-thin margins. I think what we're planning for now, which makes it so hard when you're trying to diversify your revenue, is that if we go to philanthropic sector, they are also being asked from every other nonprofit in the sector to address critical issues, not just food, but then housing and aging. And so when we have all of that at once happening on one force and one system, the result isn't good, and there's no planning that you could do around that other than trying to protect community the best that you can.
Please, one more. Last one.
Public safety. Can you talk a little bit more about how much Arizona police and fire departments depend on these federal grants and what this has kind of been like for them the last couple days?
Yeah, I think we both spoken to Mayor Gallego, who's reported in the city of Phoenix alone, we're talking grants in the range of about $35 million. That comes in the form of COPS grants, which helps the city supplement the hiring of new police officers to help with the issues that they've had relative to hiring new officers. The Burn Jag grant, which helps the Phoenix Fire Department to hire more firefighters. Now, City of Phoenix is the largest one, but the same exact programs support law enforcement throughout our districts and throughout the state of Arizona. So there's actually a very close working relationship between the federal government and the locals, specifically as it relates to public safety. If these programs are defunded, unfunded, because the Trump administration decides they don't like, I won't mention any particular city, but they don't like a particular policy of a city here in the state of Arizona or maybe elsewhere in the country, are they really willing to defund the police because they don't like a particular program? Now that we can have that debate in Congress in the future. The president wants to take that position, bring it to Congress and we'll debate it and make a decision. But what we're talking about right now is money that's already been voted on by Congress, appropriated by Congress, signed by the president. The cities have planned to increase the number of police officers and firefighters that they hire because of that, and now they're threatening to take it away unilaterally by this administration. That's what we're saying is illegal and moves us more towards authoritarianism.
Yeah, and I'd like to draw on that point as well. Something that hasn't been talked about as much is the line in the original memo that talks about the review process and what's being reviewed, right? I don't have it memorized, but it's about looking at programs related to Green New Deal energy policies, DEI, wokeness, transgenderism, right? So they're painting these broad brushes using these political talking points to say that we're going to be looking to see if these areas, in our view, are part of the money that we're distributing, right? Pretty much everyone's going to be affected by something like that. If they really go through and they say, oh, this municipality has a climate action plan because they recognize the need to build a resilient city and prepare for extreme heat, or in a police department there are initiatives to hire more women, for example, because we need to have a more diverse representation in our law enforcement. All of these things are trying to dictate and force local governments, state governments, nonprofits to do exactly what they want and be in line with their backward policies. Otherwise, they're going to weaponize the funding. And that is a really, really scary position to be in for our country.
Just a quick follow-up. I'm just curious, maybe for you guys and for the nonprofits, just because this is rescinded, right? I think there's still been some confusion. The audit process still going on, like to your point, that they're trying to align with Trump's executive orders in reference to DEI and Green New Deal? Like, are these nonprofits still having to submit an audit and comprehensive report of whether they align with Trump's executive orders or not, or is that also part of this rescission?
The press secretary was very clear today. She said everything is still moving forward. The memo has been rescinded, but we are still reviewing all of this funding, I think she said rigorously, and continuing, like they were doubling down. It's really just this nuance around the memo. Again, it's causing confusion, and to the congressman's point, they're trying to get rid of that 5-day stay that was issued by the judge.
You can imagine the use of the term Green New Deal in the memo. They're going to try to root out anything that supports the Green New Deal. That's clearly a political document. It's a kind of a talking point on their side. But what does that mean in reality? Congressman Ansari was a leader on climate change policy in the city of Phoenix, trying to make our more electric buses, for example, more electric vehicle charging stations so we can increase the public's usage and feel more comfortable buying electric vehicles. Governor Lewis, if you look at what happened in Gila River community, they've done some of the most important solar projects in the entire United States of America. Are they now going to defund grants to the city or to Gila River because of the so-called, it supports the Green New Deal. That's what's at risk. This is why it has sowed chaos and confusion and pandemonium around the country. These executive orders and the OMB memo weren't ready for prime time, but they told us exactly where they are going, and I guess we'll